30 seconds and counting. 25 seconds and counting. We are still go. 20 seconds. Guidance alert. The guidance system now going internal. 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. Ignition sequence start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good morning and welcome to the Angry Astronaut. Getting started earlier than usual today because I'm going to be joining my son and quite a number of family members for kind of a lunch get-together celebrating his graduation from high school. This is my youngest kid, so now all my kids are in college. Or will be very soon. So quite a transition for everybody. So ending this broadcast pretty promptly today and heading off to meet up with him. So thank you very much for joining me, given the fact that that things are a little bit different. Good afternoon, by the way, to my viewers in Europe and Africa, and good very, very, very early morning, perhaps even late at night for my viewers in the Pacific Rim. Where is everybody checking in from today? My usual question that I like to ask. Where is everybody watching from? Ireland, hello, thank you so much. UK, Hamburg, Pennsylvania, hello. Melbourne, hello. India, thank you so much for checking in. Munich, hello. Utah, thanks so much for checking in. New South Wales, Motown, is that right? Cool. Lithuania, hello, thank you so much for checking in. Belgium, Philippines, hello. Tampa, Florida, hello. Mulheim on the Ruhr in Germany. Georgia, Long Island, thank you so much for checking in. Texas, New York, Ohio, thank you. Wisconsin, Carl, thank you so much for saying that. I'll make sure to pass that on to my son. Chicago, Yorkshire, hello, Yorkshire. Hello, Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Derby, hello, Israel. Argentina, hello, Yorkshire. A lot more people from Yorkshire joining us. South Carolina, hello, of course, that's where I am currently in Greenville. Long Island, hello, Long Island. A good friend of mine from Long Island, actually. Oklahoma, Charleston, West Virginia, Vermont, Lancashire, hello, Bel Air, Maryland, Ballyclare, hello, thank you so much for tuning in. Hello, Florida. Boy, a lot of great people. Hello, Connecticut. Thank you so much for tuning in. Really do appreciate that. Producer got a little static in my ear. I have no idea if that has anything to, if that's being heard, but I thought I'd just mention that to you. I'm sure we're probably not hearing it on the broadcast. So in any event, thank you very much for joining us today. Hello, Chicago. Thank you so much for tuning in. We have over 120 people already tuned in today. So really appreciate you joining us. Hello, Akron. So yeah, we got quite a topic to discuss today, something that's been talked about a number of times, obviously over the years, ever since Starship became a thing, and ever since SLS has continued to present more and more problems. I mean, obviously, you know, SLS flew. It flew very successfully. It had very few problems, a little bit of damage to the pad, but really not a great deal. And, you know, a couple of minor issues, but for the most part, the rocket and Orion performed perfectly. But does that justify spending limitless amounts of money on the rocket? Well, obviously not. You know, and we just got a report, and I'm going to be releasing a video tomorrow about this topic. I was planning today, just too much going on with my son's graduation, but about all of the details from the latest report from the NASA Office of Inspector General, my good buddies over there who continue to continue to report the truth. We'll put it that way. If you want the truth about what's going on at NASA, you turn to the NASA Office of Inspector General. I actually had an opportunity to speak to one of their representatives at the Space Symposium in Colorado Springs. He was very surprised that I even knew who he was, or that there was such a department, that nobody ever really talks about it, etc. And so that's a really invaluable part of the NASA organization. And I think that they should be paying very close attention to everything that's going on right now in association with Artemis, because obviously it's not just about SLS. We also need to, determine what our timetables are for everything else associated with this, especially the HLS program, both with Lunar Starship and now with this Blue Origin Blue Moon lander, whenever that thing gets into service. Those are things that we really need to know a lot about as well. But once again, back to SLS, the latest report from OIG shows that we're another $6 billion over budget. Another $6 billion on top of all of the extra money that's already been plowed into this thing. This is already insanely over budget. It's already insanely behind schedule. And once again, we get more information from NASA OIG suggesting that we're another $6 billion over budget is what is projected to happen. And this is mostly in association with engines, both the new RS-25s, which are supposed to be manufactured more efficiently and more cheaply right now, supposedly. I think we all know that that's not the case. And also the new solid rocket boosters. I'll be talking more in this video upcoming tomorrow as to all of the details as to what's making these things so much more expensive and how these things could have been a lot less expensive. A copy of old rockets costs more than double the entire business biggest rocket ever. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. And once again, the RS-25 engines, those are really, really good engines. And the new ones that they're making are not even supposed to be reusable. In theory, these things are supposed to be simpler, more straightforward, and less expensive. That's the idea. But guess what? Obviously, that's not what's happening. Instead, this thing's going insanely over budget. And now that we are facing an environment in Congress where we're having a really difficult time passing any sort of budget that involves an increase in any particular department's, budget, given the fact that NASA is going to be hard pressed just to keep the budget that they currently have, how the hell are they supposed to be able to build these rockets under those circumstances? Well, obviously they're not. And so now at this point, much more seriously than ever, I think it's time for us to start looking at replacing it with something that is affordable. Now, Elon recently admitted that Starship has been about $5 billion or so has been invested in Starship up to this point, which means that he has already spent all of the government money that he's received for the Starship HLS program. He's already invested more money in Starship than he got from the government. So now it's definitely going into his own private investment. Who knows how much that's going to end up being. I'm from the government and here to help. Yeah, that's that dates back to the 80s, actually. And Ronald Reagan, I believe, was the first person to say that. And it couldn't be more true. I think that unfortunately, the same government that was able to get us to the moon before, able to successfully put us on the moon in such a short amount of time back in the 60s, now is demonstrating that they are not only unable to do this in a reasonable time frame, but they are also unable to do it affordably. Real American, thank you so much for the super chat. By the way, guys, I am really appreciative for all of your support right now. The GoFundMe has been doing fantastically. That is, of course, money to take me across the Atlantic. But I'll tell you something, as far as ad revenue is concerned, this is the worst month I've had in 2 years. So the fact that you guys have been so generous, that has made a huge difference to me. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for that. Real American, your question, how soon do I think Starship gets into flying monthly or weekly flights? It depends on what we define as being monthly flights. I think that if Starship had not destroyed its own launch pad recently, they could have started flying monthly by the end of this year. I think that they have demonstrated, SpaceX has demonstrated that they are very capable of getting new rockets, produced and launching them very swiftly. Actually, I think that if there weren't complications involved with this launch, if the launch had left the launch facility completely unscathed, I think there's a good chance that they could have turned around another rocket in the amount of time that Elon said they could have turned it around. That is to say, 1 to 2 months, that 1 to 2 month estimate that he gave, that's, completely crazy otherwise. But if he had a completely intact launch pad, I think he could have been launching in, every 1 to 2 months. Now, weekly, that's going to be a lot more difficult. That's a launch cadence that's going to take a long time to get to that point. Falcon 9 obviously is at that point, and even better, obviously, than every week right now. Much better, but it has taken SpaceX a considerable amount of time to get there, and also it is a much it's a much smaller rocket, just a much more reasonable thing to try to land. Hello back to you, Netherlands and Australia. Really do appreciate that. Kennedy Johnson administration, same what's got the USA into the Vietnam War. Good point. Good point. This is a government, or maybe I think the best thing to talk about is it's the kind of NASA we have today versus the kind of NASA we had back then. You're right. In terms of making terrible decisions, this government has been just as inclined to make terrible decisions now as it has in the past. It made a whole bunch of bad decisions in the history of our country, as have most governments. I'd say most governments have made massive, mistakes over their time that they've been there. So in any event, but how do we get there, right? I mean, if we are going to replace SLS with Starship, which I think we really need to be seriously looking at, obviously we don't need, a massive launch cadence in order to start using Starship to go to the moon. So, how do we, what's it going to take to do that? Can it really realistically be done? Now, Administrator Nelson said absolutely not. Administrator Nelson says that, Starship looks very promising, but, we need to look at things practically. He said SLS is in service now and Starship is not. But the thing of it is, we're not going to be able to land human beings on the surface of the moon without a functional Starship, without a human rated Starship. So if we're going to need that anyway, to land on the surface of the moon, how much more of a leap is it going to be in order to get to that point, to get to the point to where we can use Starship for the entire job? Well, the steps are pretty obvious. I think it's going to be a long period of time before Starship is going to be safe enough to launch with human beings in the fairing. I think that a human rated Starship to where humans are on the launch pad with the ship, I think it's going to be a considerable amount of time before it's ready to handle that. That is a problem because Starship doesn't have an abort system. I really don't see NASA ever replacing the SLS Orion configuration with Starship all the way. So obviously then the first step would be to get lunar Starship into orbit and then refuel it and then launch a Falcon 9 with the astronauts on a Crew Dragon, transfer, hopefully hard dock with the Starship, transfer those astronauts over to the human rated Starship and then go from there. All of these things involve a great deal of complexity, obviously. But we're going to need to do the vast majority of those things if we're going to successfully carry out Artemis 3. Artemis 3 is impossible unless we are refueling Starship in low Earth orbit pretty swiftly. So all of the steps that are necessary to get Starship from Boca Chica to the surface of the moon are going to be required before we can carry out Artemis 3. So the only missing piece really is transferring astronauts from Crew Dragon to a human rated Starship, at the end of the process. Once you have it refueled, then transfer it. I mean, how difficult is that? If we have already mastered the process necessary of transferring all of the fuel, once we have, mastered the entire process necessary of getting Starship refueled in orbit, then is it really necessary to use SLS at all anymore? And my answer to that in general is no. I would say that once we have the refueling process of Starship down pat, I don't think it's necessary for us to use anything else except Starship. Once we have demonstrated that Starship is capable of safely putting human beings on the surface of the moon, then the Orion no longer becomes necessary. Now, if we can find a way to put Orion in the fairing perhaps of Starship, deploy it that way, and then find a way to abort with Orion, set up some sort of abort system, that would be another solution. But that's something that isn't going to happen overnight as well. No abort system means Starship is configured as DOA as a human launch system. Says Huntas Farmer, they need to completely redesign Starship to have a large human craft that can be aborted away reliably. Yeah, I would tend to agree. By the way, I saw a few comments about Starliner. I released a video about that recently. Starliner has been quite the joke lately. So in any event, by the way, guys, please please subscribe, and thank you so much for the support that you've been giving to this channel lately, because it has been really vital, let me tell you. Very, very helpful, and I deeply appreciate all the assistance that I've been getting lately, because it makes all the difference to being able to keep this channel going. So thanks so much for all that. Shuttle never had a launch abort system. That's true, Marvin, and that's one thing that NASA never wants to get back to. NASA never wants to get back to an environment to where they don't have an abort system on their human-rated spacecraft, with the scenario that they had involved with the shuttle, because we lost human beings on the shuttle because there was no abort system. That's something that NASA never wants to repeat. Now, I'm not saying that SpaceX wouldn't necessarily be able to do this on their own. They might be willing to take that chance without an abort system, but NASA never will. Gold, thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. Angry Astronaut, what are your thoughts about the implications of AI-based LLMs in engineering? The CEO of Freshworks and the time to code complex software went from 12 weeks to 17 hours. Yeah. What they call narrow AI, to where AI can focus on a single subject, whether it be engineering, even if it's writing scripts for TV shows and stuff like that. AI seems to be proving to be more and more promising all the time. There are some amazing things that we are going to be able to do with AI. At the same time, of course, I really believe in a lot of what Elon has to say about AI, the concerns that he has about AI. I think that they are well grounded in reality. If we have countries that begin to militarize and weaponize AI to use it to break down the defense systems of other countries, hack into their defense networks, etc., that's where we're starting to get ourselves in very serious trouble. AI has to be very carefully managed. And I don't know, it could be a very difficult thing to get all the nations of the world to collaborate and to agree that all of this stuff needs to be carefully managed. It scares me, let me tell you. I think it's a very serious, tangible threat to human civilization. Don't think an abort system would have saved anybody on Challenger. Yeah, that's quite possible. It all depends, I guess, on how the abort system was set up, because abort systems can get a crew clear of a blast, of an explosion, very, very quickly. It is possible that if they were in some kind of an abort capsule, if something like that could have been designed for the shuttle, they could have very well gotten clear of a blast relatively intact and parachuted down. But it would have been a very difficult thing indeed to do. And of course, we got to see that a little bit with New Shepard recently when it exploded. I mean, that was a quite a violent blast. And of course, the capsule got clear of it. It wasn't, I'm sure it wouldn't have been comfortable for anybody on board, but nevertheless, it was very, very dangerous. And yeah, I agree with what people are saying. The shuttle would have had to have been redesigned. Real American, thanks again. Boy, you guys are fantastic. Really appreciate your support today. I really do appreciate it. It makes a lot of difference. So thanks a lot for what all of you are doing for me today. Convert Falcon 9 to use Raptors, send 10 plus people. Maybe. Of course, Falcon 9 is restricted not only by its power, but also by the fairing size that it has at its disposal. The fairing on Falcon 9 is relatively small, and therefore the size of human-rated capsules that it can carry is restricted as well. So there are some restrictions as to what Crew Dragon can realistically carry. But again, keep in mind, Artemis doesn't require any more than 4 astronauts in any given mission. There are really no mission configurations for a very long period of time that require any more than 4 astronauts. So that being the case, I mean, it's it's pretty obvious here that is, if Crew Dragon obviously can transfer 4 astronauts over to a human-rated starship, and then the human-rated starship takes care of the rest of the journey. Of course, also the life support system on the life support system on Lunar Starship is going to have to be resilient enough to carry those astronauts for a very long period of time. It will have to be able to sustain them for at least a month and possibly longer, at least as resilient as what Orion's life support system is capable of doing. And that's an important consideration as well. Gold, thank you so much for your support. You guys are awesome today. Thank you so much. In terms of rocket science, is it more software or hardware that delays launches? You know what? That's a very good question. I would say with what Starliner has been experiencing today, that's obviously software. Software has been having a tremendous impact on Starliner's ability to to get into service. And one of the problems, of course, with a lot of these systems is the fact that you have subcontractors handling a lot of these systems. And if the subcontractors are not all that adept at integrating their software solutions into the hardware, and that can be a real problem if you have a lot of subcontractors working together, and if they're not very well coordinated, then it can create a serious problem. One of the best ways to design is simply the way SpaceX does it. Take almost everything in-house. The vast majority of everything needs to be taken in-house. Design it in-house, produce it in-house. If you can do that and have a unified design with everybody in the same buildings and the same organization working together towards the same goal, it's just going to give you a much better result. And SpaceX were one of the first to demonstrate that. But you know what? Rocket Lab is demonstrating that very effectively as well. Most of what they do is in-house as well. What do we have here on another topic? Of Virgin Galactic will launch from Spaceport Cornwall. It would be a cool thing to see. However, my recent interview with Mel Quinn suggests that they don't have any immediate plans to do that, that the focus of Spaceport Cornwall is on satellites and not on space tourism. But who knows? The situation could change. Mel Quinn, of course, is resigning from Spaceport Cornwall. They're going to have new leadership, so maybe that could change. However, one thing that I'm going to be reporting on tomorrow is the fact that Spaceport Cornwall has inked a new deal, a solid new relationship with a new horizontal launch provider. So I'll be bringing you the details on that tomorrow. Boeing has problems with software and hardware. It's true. The problems with their thrusters, all of that, their valves, etc. All of those things created massive problems. Boy, over 250 people tuned in today. Thank you so much. Please like, please subscribe. And once again, thanks so much to everybody who's been supporting through super chats and otherwise. Very, very helpful, especially now at the end of the month. Thanks so much for all of that. Okay, back to what's necessary then. So just to review again, what's really necessary in order to transition from SLS to Starship? Well, Starship is going to have to demonstrate that it's capable of handling every piece of this process. In other words, it's going to have to demonstrate that it can be swiftly refueled in low Earth orbit. It's going to have to demonstrate that it can safely rendezvous with the Lunar Gateway if necessary. The Lunar Gateway remains an important part of the Artemis program, for at least for the foreseeable future. So it's got to demonstrate that it can, dock in low Earth orbit. All of those things are still required with Artemis 3 anyway. And then it's going to have to demonstrate that it can safely put human beings on the moon. If it can do all of those things, then all that remains is the transition of humans on Crew Dragon for astronauts or whatever, from Crew Dragon to Starship in low Earth orbit. If it can demonstrate that it's capable of doing that, and that I think is a pretty low hurdle. If it's done everything else, if it can do all of that LEO refueling and maintain the launch cadence necessary to do that. John, by the way, thank you so much. First ever super chat from John. Fantastic. Really appreciate your support. It makes all the difference in the world. So if they can demonstrate that that is realistically possible, then that could very well change everything. I don't see why Starship is not then a viable long-term replacement for SLS once it gets to the point to where it's able to handle everything that is necessary for Artemis 3. Then really the only thing that remains, its ability to transition crew from Crew Dragon to Starship in low Earth orbit. That's the only thing that remains, and I think that should be, it should be very swiftly done. Plastic Pinocchio, thank you so much for the €6. How long will SpaceX keep Falcon 9 flying once Starship starts launching regularly? Daniel, I would say not too much longer. I think Falcon Heavy will have a very important job because Falcon Heavy is capable of dropping off substantial payloads directly in geosynchronous orbit, whereas Starship, it's very difficult without a third stage for Starship to accomplish that. But if Starship is indeed flying all the time, if it's flying regularly without any, if it starts maintaining a similar cadence to what Falcon 9 can do, and most importantly, if it becomes 100% reusable, and those are big ifs, by the way. If it accomplishes all of that, then I think Falcon 9 will be very swiftly replaced because that has always been Elon Musk's intention. That's always been something that he's wanted to do. So I think that it's very realistic to say that once Starship does manage to accomplish that we're going to be seeing Falcon 9 entirely replaced. But that's a ways on the horizon. I think it's going to be a long time before Starship can maintain the kind of launch cadence that Falcon 9 can do. I think it will be a long time before Starship accomplishes 100% reusability. But once that's done, Falcon 9 shouldn't stay in service for a whole lot longer. So really, but again, to say that it's going to take a long time, NASA is gambling a lot on this long time scenario, right? I mean, if Starship does not accomplish reusability, if it does not accomplish the ability to refuel quickly in low Earth orbit, then Artemis 3 doesn't happen. It doesn't happen at all. So obviously, this is something that NASA is gambling on happening. So if it doesn't happen, then it's going to have to be replaced by Lunar Starship, rather by the Blue Moon solution, and God knows how long it will take for that to get into service. These are all very complicated things coming up, but nevertheless, NASA is betting on Starship in a big way. And if they are betting on Starship to get astronauts to the surface of the moon and to accomplish everything that it needs to do to get to that point, it's really not a whole lot further to get to the point to where it can take astronauts the whole way. And if that is indeed the case, given how far over budget SLS is now, how vulnerable it is, given how much, how Congress might very well turn on it at any moment, given how far over budget it's going in our current climate, I think that there's no other way to be looking at it. NASA really needs to seriously look at completely replacing SLS with Starship, especially given the fact that we just got news that we're looking at another $6 billion worth of over budget. It's not time yet to completely replace it because we still don't know for certain that Starship is going to be a viable replacement. But I think that the technology and what we've seen thus far is promising enough to at least start making plans for this to occur sometime in the near future. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. Once again, please like, please subscribe. Thanks so much for your support. Also, please consider hitting that little join button if you haven't already become part of this community. We would like that as well. Gold, thank you. Oh my God. Okay, I'll answer this last question since there was an 11th hour super chat here. How much do you think the environmental review of Starship is really a political weapon in order to make SLS look absolute if Starship is viable first? Oh, I don't think that there is. I definitely think there is some politics involved in that. There's no question in my mind that there is some political motivation there. And there definitely are powers at work right now to try to see to it that Starship is not successful. I think that that is something that is very much in the interest of a lot of powerful people. And I think it's just unrealistic to say that somebody isn't applying political pressure to try to see to it that Starship doesn't pass its upcoming environmental reviews, or to at least require Starship to take another year or two before it can actually enter service because of environmental concerns. I don't think it's 100% political, but I do solidly believe that politics are involved here, as they are with so many things. So until Starship clears all of these hurdles and becomes the comprehensive solution for our journey across the solar system, I urge all of you to stay angry about space.